All right, hey guys, so we're going to talk about the different kinds of data that we have and then another way to represent our data. So data that we have is either numerical or categorical. Okay, numerical data is a measurement that is expressed as numbers. So things like a person's age, how long it took you to complete a race, the amount of rainfall, things like that. Categorical data is a measurement that is sorted into groups or categories. Like the color of your eye, your favorite sports teams, your favorite ice cream flavor, your favorite pizza, your favorite food, things like that. You cannot calculate the mean, the median, the mode. Well, the mode you can, the range or the IQR for categorical data. The only thing we can find for categorical data is the mode. So the only thing for categorical data that we can find is the mode. And the mode is the thing that occurs most often. All right, now what we have here is called a relative frequency table. So a frequency table is a chart that shows the number of times a data value occurs. So it's a way to organize our data in order to graph it. The relative frequency is the number of times a data value occurs divided by the total number of data values. And it's usually expressed as a percent. A relative frequency table is a chart that shows the relative frequency. So we're going to look at this one at the bottom down here. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do on this is we want to figure out the frequency of each of these things occurring. So over here, you notice there's a bunch of shapes on the left. Okay, we want to figure out the frequency of each of those shapes occurring. So our first one is a circle. So what we're going to do is we are going to count how many circles we have here. So 1, 2, so altogether we have 9 circles. So in my frequency, I'm going to put 9 because there was 9 of them. The next thing we're going to count is our square. So if we look through here, I only see 1 square. So our square is 1. Okay. Then we have our stars. So we're going to count our stars. And I found 3 of those. All right. The next one is our triangles. There is 3 of those as well. The next thing I am going to count is my hearts. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 hearts, it looks like. Okay, so now we have the frequency of each one of these things occurring. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is we need to figure out the total. So I want to know the total amount of shapes that we have here. So if we look at this, we can either count all of them or we can add these up. So 9 plus 1 is 10. Add 3 more, we have 13. 3 more, we have 16. If we add 4 more, we have 20. So altogether, we have a total of 20 shapes to the left here that we counted. Okay, so now if you remember, when we put something into a percent or a fraction, in order to get it to a percent, we need to find out the fraction and the decimal. So this F here stands for fraction. The D stands for decimal. And the P stands for our percent. Okay, so when we have a fraction, it is our part over our whole. So when I write my fraction, I am going to take the frequency that we found and put it over the total frequency. So for my circle, we're going to have 9 over 20. For our square, we're going to have 1 over 20. For our star, we're going to have 3 over 20. For our triangle, we're also going to have 3 over 20. For our heart, we're going to have 4 over 20, which 4 over 20 we can simplify because 4 and 20 are both divisible by 20. So we can say that this is 1 over 5. And then the last one is that we have our total. So our total is 20 over 20, which is the same thing as saying 1. Okay, now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to change these fractions into decimals. So if you remember doing this, in order to change a fraction into a decimal, we have to divide. So over on the right-hand side, I'm going to start dividing. So I'm going to look at my circle first. We have 9 over 20, and we want to figure out what that is as a fraction, or as we want to turn this fraction into a decimal. So we're going to divide, and we're going to put 9.00 on the inside, and we're going to put 20 on the outside. Remember, when we divide by a decimal, we're going to bring our decimal point straight up into the quotient. Okay, now we're going to say, how many times does 20 fit into 9? It is 0. How many times does 20 fit into 90? Okay, so if we think about this, 20 fits into 90 4 times. And 4 times 20 is 80. So we're going to subtract 80 from both, or from here. So we are left with 10. We're going to bring down this 0. And how many times does 20 go into 100? It is 5, and 5 times 20 is in fact 100. So my answer for my decimal is that 9 over 20 as a decimal is 0.45. And now if you remember, when we're going from a decimal to a percent, we take our decimal 0.45 and we move our decimal 2 places to the right, and that's where a new decimal point goes. So it is 45%. Okay. All right, and we're going to move on to the next one. So we're going to find what 1 over 20 is as a decimal. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to put 20 on the outside, and we're going to put 1.0 on the inside. We're going to move our decimal straight to the top, and we're going to start dividing. So 20 goes into 1 0 times, 20 goes into 10 0 times, and 20 goes into 100 5 times, and 5 times 20 is 100. So our answer, 1/20th, is equal to 5/100. So our decimal is 0.05. And again, we're going to take this decimal, we're going to move it 2 places to the right to get our percent. And our percent is that we have 5%. All right, the next one that we're going to do is we're going to look at 3/20ths. So we're going to follow that same thing, 20 on the outside, 3.00 on the inside. We're going to take our decimal and move it straight up into the quotient. 20 goes into 3 0 times. 20 goes into 30 1 time. 1 times 20 is 20, so we're going to subtract 20. And we're left with 10. Then we have to bring down the 0, and 20 goes into 100 5 times. And 5 times 20 is 100. So our answer is 15 hundredths. And we're going to take our decimal and move it 2 places to the right to get our percent, and we get 15%. Now, if you look, star and triangle are the same thing. They're both 3/20. So I don't need to do this whole process again. I can just use those same numbers. So I'm going to go ahead and fill that in. Okay, and the last fraction we have to worry about is the heart. The heart we said is 4/20, which when we divided by 4 and simplified, we said it was equal to 1/5. Okay, now we want to turn 1/5 into a decimal. The easiest way to do this is say that 1/5 is the same thing as 2/10. And 2/10, if I say that the right way, we're going to say 2/10. And 2/10 we can say is equal to 2/10. Okay, so our decimal is 0.20. Then we're going to take our decimal and we're going to move it 2 places to the right, and we get 20%. Okay, now for the total at the bottom, if you add up all of these decimals, it should be equal to 1.0. And if you add up all of these percents, it should be equal to the whole thing, and the whole thing would mean that it's 100%. So now we've created our frequency table that we're going to use to make our percent bar graph. All right, so now is time to put this all together into our percent bar graph. So we're going to look at the bar graph that's on the top, and I brought over our frequency table that we just made. In order to make this percent bar graph, what we're going to do is we are going to color in each of the percents that we have. So the first one we have is our circle, and our circle we said is equal to 45%. So we're going to start at 0, and we're going to go to 45%, and we're going to color it in. And when we color it in, what we're saying is we are saying that this whole area right here, this 45%, is representing our circles. So I'm going to go ahead and write circle inside, because that's how many percent we said was equal to circles. The next thing we have is our squares. And we said our squares was 5%. So what we're going to do is we're going to add 5% to that. So we're going to start where we ended right here at 45%, and we're going to add 5%. So 45 plus 5 is 50. So we're going to shade in between 45 and 50. And that right there is equal to what our square was. Okay. If we keep going down the list here, the next thing we had was a star. And we said that our star was 15%. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to start at 50, and we're going to go 15 more percent. So 50 plus 15 means that we're going to go from 50. We're going to add 15, so we're going to go from 50 to 65. Okay, and from 50 to 65, that 15% right there is representing our star. Okay. The next shape that we have is our triangle, which is also 15%. So we're going to start right here at our 65 where we left off, and we're going to add 15% to that. So 65 plus 15 is 80. So we're going to color in this area with yellow like our star, and that is, or like our triangle, sorry, and that is our triangle. The last thing that we have is our heart. So our heart we said was equal to 20%. So if we go from 80 and we add 20, 80 plus 20 is 100. So that gives us our full 100% of our percent bar model. Okay. Now there is a second way that you can represent this, and you can represent it just as a regular bar graph, like what you guys have done in the past. So if you do it that way, you would do the same thing we just did, except you would make it into a bar graph. So our circle would go to 45. We'd color it in. Our squares would only go to 5, so it'd be nice and little down here. Our stars would go to 15. Okay. Our triangle would also go to 15. And our hearts would go to 20. Either way, you're able to see the way that it is represented in that we're representing the frequency that each thing happened. We're doing it in these different ways.